I'm going to be speaking to you this morning on something that will hopefully be beneficial to us as we look at vision and where we're going in the future of this church. If you were around circa 9 years ago, you may have heard some of this sermon before, but I'm going to be preaching to you this morning about the Esau syndrome. Okay. This isn't on. There you go. Now it's on. Okay, this is from the Message translation. It's Hebrews 12, verses 16 and 17. It says this: "Watch out for the Esau syndrome, trading away God's lifelong gift in order to satisfy a short-term appetite. You well know how Esau later regretted that impulsive act and wanted God's blessing, but by then it was too late, tears or no tears." The New Living Translation says this: "Make sure that no one is immoral or godless like Esau. He traded his birthright as the oldest son for a single meal. And afterwards, when he wanted his father's blessing, he was rejected. It was too late for repentance, even though he wept bitter tears." You might not know the story of Jacob and Esau. You might do. It occurs in Genesis 25. And there are twin brothers. One is called Jacob, and it says of Jacob that he hung around the tents. He hung around with the ladies in the tents and the cooking and that kind of stuff. And then there was Esau, who was a hunter. And he went out and he would hunt things and capture game. I'll leave you to decide which one's which from that picture. And Esau was the older brother. So he was the rightful heir to everything that they had. He was the one who, in that culture, would receive the father's blessing. Before the father died, he would bless them, he'd pray for the older brother and give them a special blessing, and that was the way that the inheritance was passed along. So what happens is one day, after a tiring day hunting and chasing down livestock, Esau comes home and he's hungry. He's been out working hard, and he walks in and he finds Jacob cooking. And Esau says, "Oh, brother, let me have some of that stew." And Jacob, if you don't know anything about Jacob was a bit of a trickster. He says this: "Okay, you can have some, but first you have to sell me your birthright. I'll give you a bowl of stew for your birthright, your blessing, your inheritance." And Esau, despite being so manly and a hunter, is a bit of a drama queen and says this: "What good is that blessing to me if I'm going to die now of hunger?" So he was either really hungry or he was putting it on a bit. Jacob says, "Swear to me first and then I'll give you some stew." Esau swears an oath and sells his birthright to Jacob. Then later on, their father, who's Isaac, decides it's time to give the blessing, and long story short, he gets tricked into giving the blessing to Jacob, because he didn't know about this deal that they'd made, but he actually ends up getting tricked into giving the blessing to Jacob, so Esau does miss out. Esau finds out, and he comes in, and he says, "Dad, is there any blessing left for me?" And the dad says, I've given it all. I've given it all to Jacob. And there's no blessing left for him. That's the general gist of it. Obviously, there's a little bit more to it than that. But if you want to read that properly, that story, it's in Genesis 25 to 27. And if you read those chapters, there's other good stuff in there too. Chapter 27 of Genesis tells you what the blessing was that Esau was meant to get. So this is what it says: "May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed." And the description of the food that he swapped that blessing for goes like this: "Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew." He traded an abundance of grain and new wine. He traded nations coming to bow before him for some bread and some lentil stew. there wasn't even any meat. So today we're going to look at how do we avoid the Esau syndrome. And I want to put to you that we avoid it by keeping the faith. The Esau syndrome is the trading away of God's long-term blessing to satisfy a short-term appetite. Sometimes this is an impulsive act, though there is often a decision made, the effects of which cannot be reversed. Now, just so we're clear, I want to make this abundantly clear, we're talking about the blessing of God and him using us to the fullest potential, not loss of salvation. God is gracious and merciful, and we have in Jesus someone who can relate to our temptations. But that doesn't mean we don't get disciplined, and it doesn't mean we can't miss out on things because of our disobedience. But it's not about losing your salvation. I don't want to miss out on what God has for me. I was given for Christmas once a worst case scenario calendar. And each day you turned over the page and it said, would you rather this case or that case? And one of them was, would you rather have a vampire bat feed on you while you sleep? Or would you rather be attacked by a raccoon? It was a good calendar. And it gave you the details. So it said, raccoons have razor sharp claws and teeth and, are savage. But vampire bats have got this sort of thing on their mouth that numbs you so they can feed on you for hours while you're asleep without you even realising. So which would be your worst case scenario? Well, I was thinking about my worst case scenario, and in relation to Esau, I was thinking that's probably one of the worst things in the world, isn't it? When you've done something and then you realise, I can't undo that. I can't undo it. There's no way I can undo it. It's like when in the heat of the moment an angry or careless word gets spoken. And you know that you've really hurt that person. And obviously you can rebuild that relationship, but you can't undo that hurt that you've done. It's like when you're practicing kick-ups in the front room when you shouldn't be, and you knock the wedding present vase of your parents off of the TV and it breaks, never to be repaired. That realisation dawns on you, I was pushing the envelope. I knew I shouldn't have been doing that. I thought, I'll just 5 more minutes, I'll do it. It dawns on you when you fully comprehend, I can't undo it. And it's like, for me, I know in those situations, when I broke that vase, I was just like, oh no, I've got to deal with that now. I've got to deal with the fact that I've upset those people. I've upset my parents. I've broken something that I can't ever fix. It's like your whole body has turned to stone, and then the bottom of your stomach decides to get even heavier. We don't want that feeling, do we? And I know I especially don't want that feeling in relation to the plans that God has for me. Now, this is not a do as you're told or else. This is a keep going, you're almost there. You're almost there. I know many of us have been having tough times in this church, that it's been a difficult season. It's been the left-hand side of the picture, and I think God wants to say to us, keep going. You're almost there. There's another hill to crest, and then it's sliding down with a big grin on your face. It's often when we have something that we're looking forward to and we're really close that we can allow ourselves to just, I'll just do that quick fix. I'm so close to it. Okay, and I'll just shortcut this last little bit. I believe God wants to encourage us this morning by saying, don't shortchange yourselves. You're almost at the tipping point. I'm about to start doing what you've been waiting for, and I really don't want you to miss out on what I'm going to do. I'd also like to say God is sovereign, and he has a sovereign plan. Nothing you do will stop his plan coming to fruition. So if you think, I've messed that up, what's God going to do now? He's going to be all right, okay? He will be okay. This morning, I want to share a few tips on how to avoid the Esau syndrome. Well, what you may not know about me is I have an honorary doctorate from the made-up University of Metaphorical Christian Illnesses. And at that university, a recent piece of research has identified the Esau syndrome as being a condition caused by lack of exercise in the neck. And so I don't have any points for you this morning, but I've got some exercises for us to do. You can perform these anywhere you like, and they're guaranteed to prevent and fight off signs of the Esau syndrome. You can trust me as a fictional doctor. So what do? We look forward, we look up, we look left and right, or right and left, whichever is your preference. You look behind, and you look to the horizon. But when you look to the horizon, you have to do it in a particular way. So you have to do it kind of like this. Okay? If you can't do that, okay, what you need to do is just say the PRU of the word prune. Okay? Prune. And that will give you the sort of pouty lips. If that's still not good enough for you, open your mouth, squeeze in your cheeks, bite down. You see, and you can get that model look. It's not about being skinny, it's about biting your cheeks, you see. You have to look forward, look up, look left and right, look behind and look to the horizon. Hebrews 10:23 says this, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful." Look forward to what God has promised you. He who promised is faithful. What has God spoken to you about? I think that's fantastic what Sarah shared right at the end. I was like, brilliant. That fits right in. Sometimes we can live our life where we're just going, okay, I'm not really waiting for anything. I'm not living in expectation of anything. I'm just passing the days. And that's okay. That's fine for a period of time. But we should be looking for God to do something in our lives. We should have promises from God that we're looking to and that we're saying, God, when are you going to do this? When are you going to break through in that situation? Sometimes we can be in a holding pattern, and as I said, that's okay. But it shouldn't be the norm for our life. I'm sure had Esau reminded himself, I've been promised everything that I see. Why am Jacob's trying to hustle me out of my birthright for some stew? Well, I'll just go to any of the other number of tents that are around and say, listen, you know who I am. I'm the heir. Can I have some food, please? Remind ourselves of the promises. What do I have faith for? Ask yourself that question. And personally, I'm living my life in faith for three things at the moment. A personal thing, a spiritual thing, and a church thing. A personal thing, I'm praying for my little girls to come to know Jesus when they're young. I don't want them to be 18 and have sort of done lots of living. I want them to be kids who put their faith in Jesus and sort of carry on right through. I'm praying for that. I'm praying for a spiritual thing where people would respond to the gospel on a Sunday morning when we preach it. Next week we're going to have visitors in this room who don't know Jesus, who may not know Jesus, and the gospel will be preached. And I'm praying, God, I want to see people getting saved. Not just Sunday mornings, but that is a particular thing I'm praying into. And for us as a church, I'm praying for a new place to meet. God, where is it? Where are we meant to be? And I'm determined that I won't jeopardize the blessing of God in those things whenever the offer of a quick fix comes along, or a substitute for one that comes along. I could very easily say to Millie right now, because she's got this kind of vocabulary, I could say, I could describe hell to her and how horrible that is and how amazing heaven is, and say, would you like to go to heaven or would you like to go to hell? And she would, she understands enough to go, well, obviously I would like to go to the nice place, please, Daddy. Great, you're saved. But that would be shortcutting her faith. That wouldn't be her meeting Jesus. That would just be me saying, do you want something nice or do you want something horrible? I want steak dinner, not lentil stew. There's nothing wrong with lentil stew. As an accompaniment, to a steak dinner. I had a job in a cosmetics factory for a period of time, and it was an assembly line, and you had to wear all, the hat and stuff. And I had a job where I was putting the lids on the bottles. That was my job. So I had a big bag of lids, and I'd get some in my hand. 2.5 hours. Then, seeing how good a job I'd done on the lids, so I got moved to stoppers. So I was putting the stoppers in. 2.5 hours. Moved down the line, checking the bottoms for this code that I couldn't see under the fluorescent lights. I'm assuming it's there. What got me through each section of that day was, oh man, I'm looking up at the clock. Oh, I've got a break in 2 hours. Praise the Lord. Got a break in 1 hour and 59 minutes. It's sort of, I was looking forward to the promise that I was waiting for. Now, some people, that is their job and that's their life. And I've got massive respect for people. But things like that need to be broken up. When you're doing a monotonous task, when you're just ticking off the days, actually, I'm looking for God to break in a situation. So brothers and sisters, we must hold on to what God has said to us. Keep ourselves aware of it. Remind ourselves of it. Write it down. Pin it on your wall. Keep it in your mind and in your prayers. Look forward to what God is going to do. Look up. Hebrews 12:2-3 says this, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Look up, fix our eyes on Jesus. He is the author and perfecter of our faith. He's where our faith begins and where it finds its completion. If Esau had looked to the source of his promise, he would have gone to his dad. If he'd gone to his dad and said, Dad, Jacob's trying to get me to sell my birthright for a bowl of stew, the dad probably would have slapped Jacob around the back of the head with a newspaper and gone, give him some stew, you selfish little whatever. He would have just forced him to do it. He would have told Jacob to or provided food for himself. The person who made something is the best qualified to make it work. This is a car that I owned. It's a 1974 Morris Marina. It looked cool to me at the time. I tried to fix it with my friend. I bought it when I was in New Zealand for $200. It was only worth $200. It had black smoke that spewed out. It was like a sort of a scene from James Bond, where I was trying to get away from people. And I tried to fix it with a friend of mine, who was an older guy, and I thought, okay, he seems to know what he's doing. We changed the spark plugs, we put new oil in, all of this sort of stuff. I was pretty impressed at the end of it, because I was like, man, we've opened it up, taken some stuff out and put other stuff in, and it still works. This is amazing. The problem was, at one point, I sort of was doubting our success when there was a hole in the car which looked like it was meant to be there, and his solution was, let's just stuff a rag in there. So, needless to say, we didn't succeed. We tried to fix it. Black stuff was coming out before it was coming out afterwards, so we didn't do a very good job. But, it didn't explode or anything like that. What the car really needed, though, was a mechanic. It didn't need a pastor and his apprentice, trainee, intern pastor to start poking around and trying to fix it because we didn't know what we were doing. It needed a mechanic. Fix our eyes on Jesus. Read about him, talk to him, worship him. One that often gets neglected, listen to him. We can get into prayer mode, can't we? And we're, oh Lord, do this, come on. I want to see you break into that life. I want to see you transform this community. Actually, sometimes we're down, oh, I'm praying, both barrels, bang. Okay, see you later, God. Not heard, not listened back for anything. Lord, I want to do this thing. Well, actually, he's trying to say, well, maybe I don't want to do it like that. Maybe I want to do this instead. But we don't listen. Imagine having a friend like that who came round to your house, sprawled on your sofa, unloaded all of their woes, all of their concerns, and then before you had a chance to reply, got up and walked out. That's not a friendship. We look forward to what God has for us. We look up to Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And we look left and right. Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Encourage others. Literally look left and right. Encourage the people around you, your brothers and sisters. If Esau had been with one of his friends and said, what do you think? Do you think I should trade my birthright for this stew? They equally would have gone, what are you talking about, Esau? There's two of us and one of him. Push him down and we'll get the stew. They might not have said that, but they could have given him some good advice. There's two occasions that people say nice things about people: funerals and weddings. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but people are really nice about people at funerals and weddings. Oh, he was a great man. Wonderful sense of humour. Would always do whatever you asked him to. Nothing was too much trouble. Often the best man speech at a wedding is, forget that one. But some of the speeches at weddings, it's such fantastic, such a great couple, such a wonderful woman, such a wonderful man. They're going to have a fantastic life together. Well, I want to say to you, don't reserve those niceties for funerals when someone's dead and they can't hear what you're saying, or your wedding, which you may have already had. I regularly try and tell, I'm pretty sure there's not a day gone past in our marriage where I haven't told Megan that I love her and that she's a great wife. And I regularly try and tell her that she's a great mum. And I'm not bigging myself up, I'm trying to big her up because she is a great mum. So I try and do that. I practice, very practical, you're a great mum, you're really good at it. I try and do that, not because I'm not lying to her, I'm telling her the truth. I'm trying to encourage her to carry on and keep going. Encourage someone. Encourage someone. Talk to them. Say thank you for serving in the church. Offer to help them out. Buy them something. I know you work really hard. I just want to buy you a cup of coffee. I don't know, whatever. Not on a Sunday because there's coffee already. I think we need to be more proactive in this area. As the cultural overtones in this nation are to be cynical and mocking. I don't mean, go around finger pistols. You're a great guy, Ben. You too, Lorraine, but you're a woman. I don't mean it in that way, but we should be encouraging each other regularly. Romans 12:10 says to outdo one another in showing honour. On the flip side of that, take encouragement. This is hard as someone who preaches. When someone comes up to you and goes, on the rare occasion, you did really well. There was a good preacher, really spoke to me. It's like, okay, thanks. You know, it can feel a bit awkward. I know there's some people who, they hate it when when people clap at the end of the sermon. Now, don't clap at the end of the sermon. Whether that's relief or a celebration, I don't know. But we should be good at receiving encouragement. Don't make it awkward. If someone's been brave to go, I've noticed that thing that you did that no one else, I noticed that you put out the chairs or you cleared some chairs away, whatever. Thank you for doing that. Take that encouragement well. Don't just go, oh, it's not me, it's the Lord. Well, that means if you do that all the time, that means when you mess it up, you know, is that the Lord too, or is that you? You know, let's be, and I understand the heart of that because I've said that myself in the past, and we are conduits, vessels, you know, we have this treasure in jars of clay, but let's be good at receiving encouragement and take it on board and go, thank you, and that spurred me on to do more. So we look forward, we look up, we look left and right. Look behind you. Had Esau remembered the stories of his not long departed relatives, he would have perhaps been reminded to the need to hold on and guard closely the promises made to him. Hebrews 13 verse 7 says this, remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you, consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Hebrews 12:11 says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Remember those who have gone before and who are going before. I usually think of my parents or people who've discipled me, and then I read biographies of people. I'm privileged as sort of to be employed full-time by the church. I get to spend time with people who are Christian leaders, who are working full-time for God. And I can go, I'm inspired by what you're doing and by what you've done in the past. Learn from people who have not only been there and done it, but they are there and they are still doing it. And learn not just from good examples, but from bad examples. I'm the youngest of 4 children, so I've learned lots of important lessons, which I didn't even have to take the class in. I just got the lesson for free. I didn't have to make the mistake. Look, if you're going to have a crossbow, don't shoot holes in your bedroom wall. You know, that's a lesson that's free for everyone. You know, learn from bad examples as well as good ones. Mostly I learn from my brothers. Well done, Reg. There's a lot to learn from others' mistakes. So what can we do practically? We can read the Bible, read about Moses, a man who was known as a friend of God. I'd love people to say that about me. You know, he was a friend of God. Whoa! Read about Stephen, who, as he was being stoned, said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. How do you take it when someone says something nasty about you? Are you able to go, oh, God, forgive them? Read books about people like Jonathan Edwards, Charles Spurgeon. Read sermons written by those men. Speak to people who are older than you in the faith, and potentially that means they're older than you physically as well. People who've been a Christian longer than you, who've been following Jesus longer than you have. Consider the outcome of their lives. What is good? Copy that. What is good? What can you copy? I just want to just sit on that for a minute. If you think, I'd love someone to disciple me, go and speak to someone. Don't wait for someone to come and grab you and go, I'm going to disciple you. That's never how it's worked for me. I've always gone and found someone and said, listen, can I meet up with you for 10 weeks? I just want to pray and read the Bible with you and ask you some questions. I've got my questions all lined up. Okay, how do you deal with a pastoral situation like this? What about like this? What about like this? Okay, I've learnt that from you. Thanks a lot, that was great. I'm going to meet with someone else. How do you structure your finances? Because you seem to give lots of money away, but actually you've got lots of, stuff that people would want as well. You don't seem to be lacking, but you're very generous. Okay. And you've learned that. Okay. How have you set up your family life? Learn from people. That's what I've done. I met with different people, took the best bits from each of their lives, pushed the other stuff away. So it's like, you're fantastic with money, but man, your kids are a mess, or you really seem to love Jesus and are free to worship, but actually that doesn't work out in the rest of it. You never told anyone about Jesus. Pick the good bits from people's lives. And that's not to condemn anyone. I'm not saying that about anyone specific. I'm just saying learn from the good bits and encourage people in their weaknesses that you see. Got one left. Done forward, up, left and right, behind. Look to the horizon. Keep a right view of what is to come. And we'll finish in 5 minutes. I apologise, we're over. Hebrews 10:23 and 25 again says this. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The day being the day that Jesus returns. This is the big one. Had Esau stopped for even 1 second to consider, I'm giving away all of this. If he just lifted his eyes and looked around, look at all of these tents and all of these people who are in my father's household, and they're going to look to me. I'm going to be the one who's the head of this family, the chief of this clan. If he'd done that, even for a second, would he have traded it for a bowl of stew and some bread? He would have laughed at Jacob and walked out the door. The ultimate hope of every Christian is looking ahead to the day that Jesus returns. By looking ahead to Jesus' return, we put everything into perspective. Current challenges, future obstacles, even past failures and successes are cast in a new light when we lift our heads and look to the horizon. When we look to the glorious return of the King. And it's a bit like the return of the King, funnily enough. And if you haven't seen the films of these, read the books first, then watch the films, because the books are superior. But there's the last one of the Lord of the Rings films is called The Return of the King. But I don't want to talk about the king that returns in that, because that's not what I'm meaning, although there's lots of anticipation in that. Anyway, but I want to say, and just bear with me for a minute, because I'm going to explain it and then we're going to flip it, and that's how it's like. So there's a character called Sam and Frodo, and they're taking this ring to Mount Doom, which is there. And as they're doing it, there's this sort of, as they get closer, there's this sort of presence that hangs over. Sort of all the time they feel like, they're trying to be secret. Something's looking for us. Something's about to find us. Something's about to happen. And there's this sort of presence that's over them in a negative sense. Well, I want to say for Christians, it's like that, but flip it round so that it's positive. There's something about to happen. He's about to break in. The kingdom's about to... healed of migraines. Well, that's the kingdom of God breaking in. Well, maybe we're a bit closer to the day. We're a bit closer to the day when he'll return and make everything how it should be. For us who are saved, Jesus' return hangs over our lives, not as a shadow bringing despair and a sense of impending doom, but as a source of light and encouragement, showing the afflictions that we now suffer for what they are. Afflictions, yes. Difficult, yes. But only momentary. The return of Jesus is the shout of the encouraging parent on the sideline in a football match or in the final straight of a race. And I'm not downplaying difficulties that people go through. I'm not doing that. But I am saying, if you lift your head and get the perspective of, I've got an eternity waiting, you will find those difficulties much easier to bear up under. So I want to encourage you, do it. Read the book of Revelation. Read it out loud. Study it. It doesn't matter if you understand every minutiae of it, every little detail, but remind yourselves, and this is the overall message of the book of Revelation, Jesus wins. He's already won, but he will win completely. He's coming back and he will fully win. Jesus is coming back and it's going to be amazing. So if Esau had looked ahead and held on to the promise, it would have been different. If he'd looked up to the source of the promise, it would have been different. If he'd looked to his friends for some encouragement and challenge, it would have been different. If he'd remembered, looked behind to those who'd gone before him, things would have been different. If he'd looked and thought about what he was giving up, things would have been different. Let's not make the mistake Esau did. I believe God's call to us today is to hold on for a bit longer. Let's look ahead to God's promises. Let's look towards Jesus, whose life should inspire us to carry on. Let's look to those around us that we might encourage them to keep going and be encouraged to keep going. Look to those who've been before so that we can lean on their experiences and learn from them. And look to the horizon, that great day when Jesus will return.